Buried beneath centuries of silence and dust lies a forgotten empire, one that predated Rome, Egypt, and even Mesopotamia. An empire so advanced, its cities had sewage systems more efficient than some modern towns. Its people left no kings, no wars, no epic monuments, only perfect brickwork, a peaceful legacy, and one haunting mystery. How did it vanish without a trace? Welcome to the world of the Indus Valley Civilization, or as archaeologists call it, the Harappan civilization. More than 4,000 years ago, while the pyramids were still rising in Egypt and Babylon was barely forming, the Indus people were building something extraordinary. At its height, the Indus Valley was home to over 5 million people, stretching from modern-day Pakistan to northwest India. Their cities, Mohenjo Daro, Harappa, Lothal, Dholavira, were marvels of urban planning. Streets ran in perfect grids. Bricks were uniform in size. Each home had private bathrooms and access to a centralized drainage system. This wasn't just rare for the ancient world, it was unheard of. But here's what makes it eerie. No grand temples, no massive palaces, no depictions of powerful kings or brutal conquerors. For a civilization this vast, where was the hierarchy? Their seals, thousands of them, depict animals, deities, and an undeciphered script. No Rosetta Stone has been found. To this day, we cannot read a single word the Indus people wrote. And that's just the beginning of the mystery. Let's start from the ground up, literally. In the 1920s, British archaeologists stumbled upon strange mounds near the Ravi River. Locals called it the Mound of the Dead Men, Mohenjo Daro. When excavation began, what they found stunned the world. They had uncovered the remains of a city meticulously planned with public wells, granaries, assembly halls, and not a single weapon in sight. Imagine walking through those ancient streets. You'd hear the splash of water from communal baths, the murmur of traders bartering at markets, and the quiet dignity of a society that valued balance and order. No statues of war heroes, no inscriptions of bloodshed, only a culture rooted in trade, craft, and harmony. Archaeologists found weights and measures so precise they could rival modern instruments. This wasn't just civilization, it was civil engineering at its finest. But here's the kicker. Unlike other ancient societies, the Indus people didn't expand through war. There's no evidence of battles or conquest. They thrived through trade, across land and sea. At Lothal, a city near the Gujarat coast, they built one of the world's first known dockyards. Goods like carnelian beads, ivory, and cotton textiles flowed through their ports, reaching as far as Mesopotamia. In fact, Mesopotamian tablets mention a mysterious trading partner called Meluha, which many scholars believe refers to the Indus Valley. So who were these people? That's where the story gets strange. Despite advanced cities, intricate crafts, and international trade, the Indus people left behind no kings, no queens, no military leaders, no tombs like the pharaohs, no ziggurats like the Sumerians. And yet, they maintained social order across thousands of miles. How? Was it a decentralized system, a council-based governance, a theocracy? We don't know, because the writing they left behind is locked away in tiny seals, undeciphered to this day. And these aren't just decorative trinkets. They appear on trade goods, tools, and buildings, meaning they likely held administrative or ritual significance. One seal shows a horned deity surrounded by animals, possibly an early version of Shiva. Another depicts a yogic figure, suggesting meditation and spiritual life existed long before we imagined. But while their spiritual beliefs remain speculative, one fact is clear. This was a society that prized balance, sanitation, and structure. Yet by 1900 BCE, signs of decline began to emerge. Wells ran dry, trade routes shifted, and one by one, the cities were abandoned. Why? Was it climate change? An invasion? A deadly plague? Or something far more enigmatic? As the 20th century unfolded, more and more cities emerged from the earth, each revealing new clues and deepening the mystery. Take Dhalavira, discovered in the 1960s in present-day Gujarat. Unlike the other Indus cities, Dhalavira was built on an island in a salt desert. Yet its water management system was nothing short of genius. Massive reservoirs, stepped wells, stone channels, all designed to harvest, store, and conserve every drop of monsoon rain. This wasn't just innovation, it was survival through science. In a region with extreme water scarcity, they engineered hydraulic systems so effective that modern engineers still study them. And what's truly shocking? They did all of this without iron tools. The Indus people were still in the Bronze Age, yet they shaped massive stones, carved detailed inscriptions, and maintained perfect symmetry in construction. Archaeologists even found signboards made of white gypsum, carefully embedded into brick walls. One sign, near Dhalavira's northern gate, contained 10 large symbols, the longest known example of Indus script. It suggests they had a system of public communication, like street signage or even city labels, nearly 4,000 years ago. But despite these discoveries, the script remains undeciphered. Do the signs represent syllables, full words, numbers? Linguists are divided. Some argue it's a Proto-Dravidian language. Others believe it's a language isolate with no modern descendants. And until we crack the code, we may never know their laws, beliefs, or even what they called themselves. We know more about their crafts. Indus artisans were incredibly skilled in bead-making, pottery, metallurgy, and shell carving. Tiny etched carnelian beads have been found in Mesopotamia, proving long-distance trade. Even gold and semi-precious stones from Afghanistan and Iran were brought in, shaped, and sent back out. They also developed one of the world's first systems of standardized weights and measures. Square weights, often made of chert, were used across cities with astonishing precision. This points to a highly integrated economy despite the absence of an identifiable central ruler. And their crafts weren't just functional, they were artistic. Dancing figurines made of bronze, terracotta toys with movable limbs, and delicately painted pottery speak of a culture rich in creativity and leisure. One famous artifact, known as the Dancing Girl, is a 4,500-year-old bronze statue found in Mohenjo Daro. It depicts a confident young girl with bangled arms and a tilted head, possibly the earliest known representation of confident femininity in sculpture. So what went wrong? If the Indus Valley was so peaceful, advanced, and connected, why did it vanish? This is where the story enters murky waters. One theory centers on climate change. Around 2000 BCE, the Saraswati River, believed to be a major water source for many Indus cities, began to dry up. Satellite imagery shows ancient riverbeds where settlements once thrived. As the monsoons weakened, water scarcity would have forced mass migration, food shortages, and collapse of trade routes. Another theory suggests tectonic shifts may have altered river flows, especially the Indus itself, making once thriving cities uninhabitable. Still, others point to gradual urban decline, not a single catastrophic event, but a slow crumbling of infrastructure, economy, and cohesion. There's no evidence of invasion, despite earlier theories involving Indo-Aryan migrations. The skeletal remains, found at sites like Mohenjo Daro, show no signs of violence. There are no burnt layers indicating widespread destruction. Instead, the decline seems systemic and ecological. It's as if the cities slowly lost their bloodline, water. And what's haunting is how quietly it all faded. No epic wars, no fire, no final battle. Just brick by brick, the cities emptied. And the people? They likely migrated east and south, blending into emerging cultures of the Gangetic Plains. Some scholars believe the later Vedic traditions absorbed aspects of Harappan culture, possibly its gods, crafts, and agricultural practices. But without written records, we're left to guess. And here lies the most chilling truth. For centuries, we had no idea this civilization even existed. While the ruins sat buried under farmland and dust, our history books glorified Egypt and Mesopotamia as the world's first urban centers. All the while, the Indus Valley was older, larger, and in many ways, more advanced. Why was it forgotten? Perhaps because it left behind no dynasties, no mythologies, no conquerors to carry on its memory. It didn't glorify war or power. It glorified order, harmony, and quiet innovation. And that kind of legacy, it doesn't scream. It whispers through bricks, drains, and broken seals. But the question still echoes: who were the Indus people really? And what might we still learn, hidden beneath the soil? Let's now explore one of the most fascinating mysteries: religion in the Indus Valley Civilization. Unlike other ancient cultures, the Indus Valley left behind no temples, no ziggurats, and no grand tombs. There's no evidence of kings buried with treasure, no colossal statues of gods. So what did they believe in? The clues are subtle, found in small terracotta figurines, carved seals, and carefully arranged structures. One of the most debated artifacts is a seal showing a figure seated in a yogic posture, surrounded by animals, known today as the Pashupati seal. Some scholars see it as a prototype of Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction and regeneration. If true, this would place the roots of Hinduism more than 4,000 years ago. Others argue it's merely a shamanic or symbolic figure, not a god at all. But the connection is compelling. A horned figure, cross-legged, meditating. A philosophy of balance, not conquest. Then there's the recurring presence of the peepal tree, considered sacred in Hinduism and Buddhism alike. Many Indus seals feature it prominently, suggesting early forms of nature worship or tree veneration. Water also seemed to play a spiritual role. The Great Bath of Mohenjo Daro, a massive, precisely engineered pool, may have been used for ritual purification. It wasn't for swimming or irrigation. Its design is too elaborate. This hints at the earliest forms of spiritual bathing, perhaps a predecessor to Hindu cleansing rituals in rivers like the Ganges. Terracotta figurines of mother goddesses suggest a fertility cult or goddess worship. Women with exaggerated hips and breasts, often adorned with jewelry, may symbolize creation and abundance. In fact, the focus on female figures, water, and trees might point to a matrifocal spiritual system, a belief structure centered on nature, fertility, and balance. And that makes the Indus people stand apart. There's no glorification of war, no idols of conquest. What emerges instead is a vision of peaceful coexistence between humans and nature, men and women, cities and rivers. But what about their daily lives? Excavations at sites like Loful have uncovered intricate homes with built-in kitchens, drainage channels, and private wells. People cooked lentils, barley, wheat, and sesame. They raised cattle, buffalo, goats, and even domesticated chickens centuries before the rest of the world. Fishing was common, At coastal sites, archaeologists found fish bones and marine shells. Lothal itself was a bustling port city with what many believe is the world's earliest known dockyard.
It's a sign that the Indus people weren't just builders, they were navigators, connected to the wider ancient world. Pottery found in Oman and Mesopotamia bears unmistakable Indus designs, and copper from Rajasthan made its way into Mesopotamian records. Even the famed city of Ur in present-day Iraq had items clearly linked to the Indus trade. What's truly remarkable is that this trade system functioned without coins. The Indus civilization never developed currency. Instead, they likely used barter, standardized weights, and seal-based identification. Imagine a vast economy across thousands of kilometers with no kings, no armies, and no money. That's not just unusual, it's unprecedented in the ancient world. And yet, the system worked for centuries. Until it didn't. As environmental stress intensified, some cities adapted by downsizing. Large urban centers broke into smaller rural settlements. The architectural style changed. The iconic baked bricks disappeared. So did the script. It wasn't an abrupt fall, but a slow diffusion. Still, some aspects of the civilization may have survived, in ways we've only recently begun to notice. For instance, the design of wells in rural India today closely resembles those found in Indus cities. Even the stepped reservoirs in Gujarat follow ancient layouts. Certain motifs, like the swastika, appear in both Indus artifacts and later Indian religious art. It's a symbol of auspiciousness in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, but its roots may stretch back to Mohenjo Daro. Even traditional jewelry styles, bangles and terracotta toys in parts of South Asia, mirror designs found in Harappan ruins. So the Indus Valley didn't vanish entirely. It may have transformed, gradually seeding the cultures that followed. But without a deciphered script, we are left piecing together the puzzle from artifacts, architecture, and educated guesses. We know they were peaceful, organized, hygienic, and artistically inclined. We know they valued symmetry, water, trade, and possibly balance over domination. And most importantly, we know they mattered. Their silence isn't emptiness. It's an invitation for us to listen more closely. Let's now explore a truly astonishing possibility. Did the Indus Valley Civilization pass down ideas that still shape the Indian subcontinent today? Start with something deceptively simple: urban planning. Many Indian cities today struggle with overcrowding, drainage issues, and water scarcity. But over 4,000 years ago, the Indus people had already mastered urban organization. Their cities weren't just functional, they were thoughtfully designed. Take Mohenjo Daro. Its streets ran in perfect grids, with major roads intersecting at right angles. Each house had access to clean water and a private bathroom. Underground drains ran beneath the roads, connecting every home to the sewage system. And these weren't elite residences. This was standard housing. Contrast this with other ancient civilizations. Even the mighty Romans came much later with their aqueducts and toilets. The concept of equitable access to basic infrastructure may have taken root here first. Next, consider standardization. Archaeologists have discovered identical weights and measures in cities separated by hundreds of kilometers. These weights, made of chert, follow a binary system: 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and so on. It's the earliest known system of metric precision, the foundation of fair trade. Even the bricks used across the Indus cities followed a standard 4:1 ratio. This wasn't convenience, it was intention.
Modern India's passion for precision in trade and craftsmanship may not be a recent cultural development, but a memory of this ancient system. Then there's personal adornment. The Indus people wore bangles, nosepins, beads, and jewelry made of carnelian, gold, and faience. They even had mirrors made from polished copper. Shell bangles, in particular, have been found in abundance, suggesting a thriving tradition of self-expression and identity through fashion. Today, the bangle remains one of the most iconic ornaments in Indian culture, a daily accessory with 4,000 years of continuity. Another thread of continuity? Terracotta toys. Miniature carts, animals with movable heads and spinning tops, found in Indus sites resemble toys made in Indian villages today. It's as if children's play has remained untouched by millennia. But one of the most profound connections may be language. Though the Indus script remains undeciphered, some researchers suggest that early Dravidian languages may hold the key. Dravidian languages like Tamil and Kannada are still spoken by millions across South India. If this theory holds, it means that the Indus script is not lost, just waiting to be translated from a living language. Linguistic connections aside, the philosophy of the Indus people may have also endured. Their emphasis on harmony, water, and balance echoes through Indian spiritual traditions, from yoga to Ayurveda. The yogic figure on the Pashupati seal could represent not a deity, but a state of being, a timeless message: control the self, align with nature, and find inner stillness. This spiritual perspective, valuing balance over domination, may have quietly influenced India's philosophical soul. And while the cities eventually faded, the legacy didn't vanish. Instead, it flowed, like the rivers they revered. Which brings us to one of the most controversial questions. Where did the Indus people go? For decades, scholars proposed a theory of violent invasion, that Indo-Aryan tribes from Central Asia swept into India and destroyed the Indus cities. This theory, based on early interpretations of Vedic texts and skeletons found in odd positions, painted a picture of conquest and replacement. But more recent archaeological evidence doesn't support widespread violence. There are no signs of mass destruction or widespread burning. The cities declined gradually, not in flames, but in silence. Climate studies reveal that shifts in monsoon patterns, the drying up of rivers like the Ghaggar Hakra, and increasing droughts created a slow-motion collapse. It wasn't war that ended them, it was water. As rivers vanished, so did the lifeblood of these cities. The people likely migrated eastward toward the Ganges plain, adapting and blending into new emerging cultures. Rather than disappearing, they may have become the roots of later South Asian civilizations. This challenges the old invasion narrative and suggests something more powerful, a cultural continuum. It's not about replacement, it's about transformation. The Indus Valley Civilization didn't vanish overnight. It melted into the soil, seeped into the rivers, and rose again through new names, new gods, and new stories.
That's why understanding the Indus isn't just about looking backward. It's about seeing the continuity of civilization, the unbroken thread from ancient Harappa to modern India. Let's now turn our attention to one of the most haunting puzzles in archaeology. Why can't we read the Indus script? Across the vast Indus territory, over 4,000 artifacts have been discovered bearing tiny inscriptions, usually no longer than 5 characters. They appear on seals, pottery, copper tablets, and tools. Each inscription is made up of delicate symbols, animals, geometric shapes, abstract forms, arranged in ways that seem intentional, even poetic. Yet, despite decades of effort, no one has cracked the code. Why? First, the brevity. Most inscriptions are just a few signs long, not nearly enough for traditional decipherment methods that rely on long texts and repeated patterns. Second, there's no bilingual Rosetta Stone, no translation in a known language to compare it with. And third, we don't even know what language family the Indus people spoke. Was it Proto-Dravidian?
Was it something completely lost to history? Or was it not even a full language, just symbols for rituals or trade? The Pashupati seal, for example, shows a horned figure sitting in a yogic posture surrounded by animals. Below the figure is a string of mysterious symbols. Are these the name of the deity? Or a spell? Or something entirely different? Several scholars, including Indian researcher Iravatham Mahadevan, have argued that the Indus script reflects an early form of Tamil, part of the Dravidian language family. Mahadevan pointed out similarities between Indus signs and later Tamil Brahmi script. He even proposed that the famous jar sign represented the Tamil word kudam, meaning pot, possibly linked to trade or ownership. Others, like Finnish researcher Asko Parpola, supported this theory and suggested that Indus signs were logosyllabic, similar to Sumerian or Egyptian hieroglyphics. But not everyone agrees. In 2004, a controversial study by computer scientists from the US claimed that the script showed no signs of linguistic structure. They argued it might just be non-linguistic symbols, perhaps representing clans, goods, or rituals. This sparked a storm in the academic world. If true, it would mean the Indus people never had a written language, only a system of symbols. But this theory is hard to accept, for one simple reason. Why would such an advanced urban civilization with complex trade networks and standard weights not develop a written language? And if they did, why did it vanish so completely? Here's where things get even more mysterious. Around 1900 BC, as the cities declined, so did the use of these symbols. No Indus script has ever been found in later South Asian cultures. It simply disappeared. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphics, which evolved into Coptic, or cuneiform, which influenced later scripts, the Indus script left no visible descendants. Or did it? Some tribal communities in South India use symbols for ritual markings, Rangoli patterns, and body tattoos. Symbols that bear a striking resemblance to those on Indus seals.
Is this pure coincidence? Or are we looking at cultural memory passed through generations? Symbols whose meanings changed, but whose shapes endured. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth. The Indus script may remain unreadable, not because it's impossible, but because we've been asking the wrong questions. What if their writing wasn't meant to be read aloud? What if it was visual philosophy, a symbolic system that captured ideas, identity, and ritual in ways we no longer understand? Think of it like a mantra. You don't translate it, you experience it. Now imagine this, a society so in tune with balance and subtlety that their writing wasn't for administration or conquest, but for aligning with cosmic principles. This might explain the uniformity of symbols across vast distances, not as a bureaucratic necessity, but as a shared spiritual language. In that case, deciphering the Indus script would require more than linguistics. It would require understanding their cosmology, their worldview, and that may be the greatest mystery of all. Because unlike most ancient civilizations, the Indus people didn't seem obsessed with kings or battles. There are no grand monuments to rulers, no victory steles, no megalomaniacal inscriptions. Their seals don't glorify war. They show buffaloes, trees, unicorns, deities in meditative poses. This is a culture that may have valued stillness over spectacle. And that's why the Indus script haunts us. Not because we can't read it, but because it's asking us to listen differently. Maybe the key is not in breaking the code, but in understanding the silence between the signs. By around 1900 BCE, something changed. The once thriving cities of Mohenjo Daro, Harappa, Dholavira, and others began to fade into silence. Wells dried up.
Trade with Mesopotamia declined. The iconic standardized weights were no longer used. It's one of history's great mysteries. Why did the Indus Valley Civilization collapse? The popular explanation? Climate change. Recent geological and satellite studies suggest that the mighty Saraswati River, which may have sustained many Indus cities, began to dry up due to shifting monsoon patterns and tectonic activity. The Ghaggar-Hakra river system, once a giving life artery, turned to dust. Without water, agriculture declined. Without surplus, cities couldn't support their populations. And slowly, the urban centers dissolved. But here's what's strange. There's no evidence of warfare, destruction, or conquest. Unlike Mesopotamia or Egypt, where cities were razed and rebuilt after invasions, the Indus cities appear to have been peacefully abandoned, almost like people chose to leave. But why? Some scholars suggest a gradual decentralization. As resources dwindled, people may have returned to smaller, rural settlements, shifting away from urban life. Instead of fighting for limited resources, the Indus people may have adapted or retreated. Others argue that trade disruptions played a role. The fall of Mesopotamian cities like Ur around the same time may have impacted long-distance trade. Without external demand, the elaborate craft industries of the Indus, beads, pottery, metallurgy, may have lost their economic foundation. And with no writing system to record it, we're left only with traces in the soil. But here's a theory even more haunting. What if the Indus people didn't collapse? What if they dispersed and became the foundation of later Indian culture? Archaeological evidence shows continuity in pottery styles, agricultural practices, and village planning from the Indus period into the later Vedic period. In fact, over 90% of Indus sites are located outside the major cities. Small villages and towns, many of which were never abandoned. Could these rural communities have preserved Indus traditions, quietly evolving while the cities crumbled? Could the spiritual DNA of the Indus, their reverence for water, nature, animals, and balance, have seeped into the culture that followed? Now, let's talk about the Aryan migration theory. According to this theory, around 1500 BCE, Indo-Aryan-speaking tribes from Central Asia migrated into the Indian subcontinent, bringing with them the Sanskrit language, Vedic rituals, and new social structures. This view, long held by Western scholars, proposed a sharp break between the urban Indus Valley and the rural Vedic people. But recent studies, archaeological and genetic, paint a more complex picture. The Vedic and Indus cultures may not have been entirely separate. There may have been interaction, mixing, and adaptation. Some scholars now argue for a continuity and change model, where the declining Indus civilization gradually gave way to Vedic traditions through cultural fusion, not conquest. This could explain why Indus symbols and motifs, like the swastika, the peepal tree, and sacred animals, continue to appear in Indian culture for millennia. Let's also not forget language. While Sanskrit became dominant in the Vedic age, the presence of Dravidian language roots in the subcontinent suggests an older linguistic layer, possibly tied to the Indus people. Could Tamil, one of the world's oldest living languages, hold whispers of Mohenjo Daro? Could rural dialects in India today preserve sounds or words once spoken in the streets of Harappa? And what of religion? The horned figure in yogic posture on the Pashupati seal bears eerie similarities to Shiva, the god of destruction and regeneration. The worship of the mother goddess, so prominent in Indus iconography, echoes in Shakti traditions across India. Even the lingam, a sacred symbol of Shiva, resembles stone artifacts found at Indus sites. Coincidence or cultural inheritance? Many archaeologists now believe that while the urban phase ended, the civilizational memory of the Indus Valley lived on. In village rituals, in oral traditions, in spiritual ideas. Not everything is written in stone. Sometimes history flows through song, soil, and silence. So perhaps the Indus people didn't vanish. They became the people of India. They faded not into ruin, but into legacy.
Still, questions remain. Why was the script lost, even as other aspects endured? What happened to the cosmopolitan life of the cities? Why did they never rebuild? For nearly 3,700 years, the world forgot the Indus Valley Civilization. It wasn't referenced in ancient texts, not mentioned in early history books, and it left behind no Rosetta Stone, no epic poems, no carved declarations like those of Mesopotamia or Egypt. The ruins of Mohenjo Daro and Harappa were mistaken for medieval forts, Buddhist stupas, or natural mounds. Locals scavenged bricks from the ruins for centuries, using them to build railways and towns, unaware they were dismantling one of humanity's greatest cities. The story of rediscovery began in the mid-1800s when British engineers working on the Lahore-Multan railway line stumbled upon thousands of uniform red bricks buried near Harappa. They didn't realize they were walking on an ancient metropolis. But it wasn't until 1921, under the leadership of Sir John Marshall, Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, that the first real excavation began. In 1924, news broke around the world. A forgotten Bronze Age civilization as advanced as Mesopotamia and Egypt had been unearthed in South Asia. Mohenjo Daro, meaning Mound of the Dead in Sindhi, revealed streets paved with brick, a drainage system more advanced than most 19th century European cities, and a mysterious script-covered seal. It stunned scholars. How could such an advanced civilization exist outside the traditional cradles of civilization narrative? The Indus Valley forced the world to rethink ancient history. Yet, even after its rediscovery, the Indus remained shrouded in mystery. One of the biggest puzzles? The Indus script. Carved on seals, pottery, tools, and amulets, often just 4 to 6 characters long, the Indus script remains undeciphered. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphics or Mesopotamian cuneiform, the Indus script lacks a bilingual key like the Rosetta Stone to unlock its meaning. Attempts to decode it using Dravidian, Sanskrit, Munda, and even Proto-Elamite language families have all been proposed and debated. Was it a full-fledged script or just symbolic marks? Was it phonetic, like an alphabet, or logographic, like Chinese? Some scholars believed it encoded economic transactions. Others think it marked personal identity, while some speculate it was religious or administrative. In 2004, a team from the Indian Institute of Technology and the Institute of Science in Bangalore found mathematical patterns in the script that suggested it was not random, but structured and intentional. A 2009 study using computer linguistics suggested the script had characteristics of a spoken language. But which one? To this day, the Indus script resists translation, a ghost language silently staring back from shards of pottery and ancient seals. Another mystery: how was this civilization governed? There's no evidence of palaces, kings, temples, or grand tombs. No statues of rulers, no inscriptions of conquests, no glorified monuments.
Compare that to Egypt's pharaohs or Mesopotamian ziggurats, the Indus Valley seems to lack a centralized elite. Some archaeologists suggest it may have been governed through a decentralized or egalitarian system, possibly a council of elders or local administrators.
Its uniform architecture and standardization across vast distances imply coordination, but perhaps not through monarchy. Imagine a society where function was prioritized over show, where cities were designed for living, not for ruling, where people worked, traded, bathed, and worshipped in harmony without needing a god-king to control them. The Great Bath at Mohenjo Daro, a massive public water tank, suggests communal rituals, but there are no massive temples or idols. Perhaps religion, governance, and daily life were intertwined, not hierarchically imposed, but socially embedded. Still, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Some argue that elite structures may have existed in materials that didn't survive, like wood or textiles, or that floods and time simply erased the ceremonial centers. Now let's talk about technology and innovation. The Indus Valley people used drills tipped with hard stones like chert to bore through carnelian beads. They mastered the use of copper and bronze, but strangely not iron, which arrived much later in the subcontinent. Their potters created perfectly symmetrical ceramics using advanced kilns. Their metallurgists crafted intricate figurines, like the famous dancing girl of Mohenjo Daro, made of bronze, poised with one hand on her hip and bangles stacked on her arms. Their builders aligned streets with cardinal directions, created wind catchers for natural cooling, and built reservoirs that collected and filtered water. Even their weights and measures were astonishingly consistent, cube-shaped stones carved with such precision that a modern scale would approve. The more we learn, the more they challenge our assumptions about ancient life. How could a civilization so old be so modern? And then it vanished. For centuries, these cities slumbered under layers of earth and myth, their people forgotten, their words unread, their legacy buried, until now. Though the Indus Valley Civilization collapsed over 3,500 years ago, its imprints are everywhere, woven into the fabric of South Asia's culture, spirituality, and society. Start with urban planning. The emphasis on grid layouts, drainage systems, standardized housing, and public utilities didn't vanish with Mohenjo Daro. In fact, these principles echo in modern Indian towns, especially those designed post-independence. Cities like Chandigarh, India's first planned city, reflect the same logic. Zones for administration, housing, trade, and public gathering. Even the use of brick construction, water tanks, and neighborhood-level planning show strong continuity. The Harappan way of living didn't end, it evolved. Then comes language. Though the Indus script remains unreadable, many scholars believe the people of the Indus Valley spoke a Proto-Dravidian language. This theory gains weight from place names, linguistic patterns, and cultural practices that continue in southern India today. Words like muthu, meaning pearl in Tamil, may descend from similar ancient roots. Cultural motifs like the sacred bull, the fig tree, or the practice of bathing rituals continue to thrive in Hindu and Dravidian traditions. Take the Pashupati seal from Mohenjo Daro. It depicts a horned yogic figure seated cross-legged, surrounded by animals. Many interpret it as a prototype of Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction and transformation. Shiva's associations with asceticism, animals, and the yogic pose make the resemblance uncanny. Could it be that Shiva, one of the oldest and most complex deities in India, has his roots in the Indus? Now consider the role of water. To the Harappans, water wasn't just functional, it was spiritual. The Great Bath wasn't a swimming pool, it was likely a ritual site, a place to purify, to renew, to connect with the divine. This reverence for water survives in Indian religious life today, from the sacred baths in the Ganges to the Abhisheka rituals in temples where deities are bathed with milk, honey, and water.
Even the terracotta figurines and animal seals found across Harappa and Mohenjo Daro point to a culture deeply connected to fertility, nature, and symbolism. In many parts of rural India today, clay figurines of cows, snakes, or gods are offered during seasonal festivals, a practice that dates back thousands of years. Let's talk about economics and trade. The Harappans were master traders. Their seals have been found in Mesopotamia, in cities like Ur and Sumer. They exported beads, cotton textiles, pottery and metals, and imported silver, tin, and luxury items. The idea of inter-regional trade is now core to modern South Asian economies, especially in textile exports, which Harappans pioneered. India's textile heritage, from cotton cultivation to loom weaving, began in the Indus. Harappans were among the first people on Earth to spin cotton. Their innovations in agriculture, like irrigation canals and crop rotation, also laid foundations that still influence modern South Asian farming. Even culinary traditions bear traces of the Indus. They cultivated barley, wheat, lentils, sesame, and mustard, staples of modern Indian diets. Some believe early forms of curries may have originated in Harappan kitchens, using mortar and pestle ground spices.
The roots of the Indian spice trade, which shaped global history, may stretch back to the ovens of Harappan homes. But it's not just physical traces, it's values. The Indus Valley may have embraced egalitarianism, communal infrastructure, and sustainability. These ideals, cooperation, water conservation, shared resources, are vital in South Asia's crowded, climate-challenged cities today. The resurgence of rainwater harvesting, eco-housing, and regional planning, it's not modern, it's ancestral. Even India's political imagination draws on the past. While no Indus king has been found, the idea of community-centric governance, as opposed to centralized monarchy, continues to inspire democratic decentralization, like India's panchayat system, where local councils make grassroots decisions. Harappa may not have left us poems or kings, but it left a way of life. And yet, one of the most haunting legacies of the Indus Valley is its disappearance. How does a civilization of 5 million people just vanish? Climate change is a leading theory. Between 2000 and 1500 BCE, the monsoon pattern shifted. Rivers dried up, including the mighty Saraswati, which many believe once flowed alongside the Indus. Droughts intensified, crops failed. Harappans began abandoning cities and dispersing into smaller rural communities. But unlike Rome or Babylon, the collapse was gradual and silent, with no record of war, plague, or invasion. It was death by climate, not by conquest. This story hits close to home. Today, we face the same threats: water scarcity, urban overcrowding, ecological imbalance. The fall of the Indus isn't just a mystery, it's a warning. But it's also a mirror. A civilization that knew how to live in harmony with water, land, and each other. But when the environment shifted, their survival depended on adaptability. As we race into the future, the Indus reminds us, it's not just about how advanced we are, it's about how well we can adapt together. The Indus Valley Civilization remains to this day one of the great unsolved riddles of the ancient world. And the biggest mystery? Their language. Over 4,000 inscribed objects have been found, on seals, pottery, tablets, etched with tiny pictographs that remain undeciphered. Each inscription is short, rarely more than 5 symbols. No Rosetta Stone, no bilingual translations, just fragments of a lost voice silent for millennia. What did these people call themselves? What did they believe in? What were their myths, their fears, their dreams? The symbols range from geometric shapes to images of animals, trees, tools, and human-like figures. Many appear repetitive, suggesting a structured system, perhaps a syllabary or a logosyllabic script like cuneiform or Chinese. But here's the problem. Most inscriptions are too short to analyze statistically. No long texts, no grammar.
And because the Indus language left no descendants that we can identify with certainty, we're left guessing. Some scholars argue it was Proto-Dravidian, the ancestor of Tamil, Telugu, and Kannada. Others think it might have been a language isolate, unrelated to anything else. There's even the controversial theory that the script was not writing at all, but a series of religious or trade symbols. Despite decades of research and AI models analyzing the patterns, the Indus script still refuses to speak. And so, their civilization remains strangely faceless. We can touch their streets, admire their craftsmanship, and infer their values, but we can't hear their stories in their own words. This is where archaeology becomes both empowering and frustrating. For every bath, bead, and brick we uncover, there's a whisper of a story left untold. Another major question: were they a peaceful society? There are almost no weapons found in Indus Valley ruins. No swords, no battle scenes, no depictions of kings boasting about victories, no large-scale fortresses or military monuments. Compare that to Mesopotamia or Egypt, where conquest was a central theme, and the difference is striking. Were the Harappans truly peaceful, or have we simply missed the evidence? Some historians argue that social control may have come through ritual, trade, or religion, not violence. Others believe that without a deciphered script, we simply can't tell. Still, the uniformity in city planning, weights, and artifacts across thousands of kilometers hints at a cohesive cultural identity, even without signs of centralized rule. It's like they built a civilization based on networks, not empires. Now, let's turn to genetics, the science rewriting ancient history. Recent studies of ancient DNA have begun to shed light on the genetic ancestry of the Indus Valley people.
The findings suggest they were a mix of South Asian hunter-gatherers, Iranian agriculturalists, and possibly steppe populations that arrived later. But crucially, the early Harappans seem to have no significant genetic input from Indo-European steppe migrants who arrived after 1500 BCE. This supports the theory that the Indus Valley Civilization predates the Vedic age and had its own distinct culture and language separate from the Sanskritic traditions that came later. This changes the narrative, pushing back against earlier colonial claims that Indian civilization began with the Aryan migrations. Instead, it suggests that India's first urban culture was homegrown, deeply rooted in the subcontinent's own soils. But if Harappans were not Indo-European speakers, and if their civilization declined before the Vedas were composed, what happened next? Where did they go? The truth is, they didn't disappear. They dispersed. As rivers dried and cities collapsed, Harappans likely migrated east and south, blending into village life, influencing new cultures, and seeding the roots of what would become post-Harappan and later Indian traditions. In fact, many agricultural and craft practices in the Gangetic Plains seem to originate from Harappan innovations. In a sense, they melted into the land, not vanished. And so their legacy isn't just ancient, it's living. Every time a potter shapes clay with traditional techniques, every time a village is built with water harvesting systems, every time a child spins cotton in the countryside, a piece of the Indus breathes again. And yet, we are still chasing answers. Satellite imaging has revealed more than 2,000 additional sites across India and Pakistan, many still unexcavated. Beneath deserts, fields, and towns, new cities wait, untouched for 4,000 years, each with the potential to rewrite what we thought we knew. There is one site in particular, Rakhigarhi, in present-day Haryana, India, which has emerged as a game-changer, larger than Mohenjo Daro, older than Harappa, and rich with artifacts, from copper tools to burial grounds.
ongoing excavations may one day reveal a Rosetta Stone, a breakthrough in understanding the script, or perhaps even an entire library of lost knowledge. We're on the cusp of a new age of discovery, and with new technology, from ground-penetrating radar to ancient DNA extraction, the Indus Valley Civilization may finally speak for itself. For all its mysteries, the Indus Valley Civilization didn't vanish without a trace. It became part of us. It shaped how ancient people built cities, grew food, worshipped, and traded. And though its name faded from memory, its soul may live on, not in temples or texts, but in everyday traditions that quietly echo across the Indian subcontinent. Consider this. The way villages are laid out in some parts of India today, with central courtyards, water wells, grain storage, mirrors Harappan city planning. The beads and bangles worn by women in Gujarat today bear striking resemblance to those excavated from Harappa. Even the ritual bathing culture, still prominent in religious life, from river dips to temple purification, echoes the Great Bath of Mohenjo Daro. Some practices survived without ever being written down, passed not by scribes, but by hands, by ritual, by memory. It's a quiet legacy, but a powerful one. Yet, we're still uncovering the full extent of what they left behind.
Recently, archaeologists found Harappan-era dam, a clear sign that they engineered landscapes, not just cities. In Lothal, there's a dry dock and potential evidence of maritime trade, suggesting they weren't just inland traders, but seafarers connecting to Mesopotamia and beyond. There are even inscriptions found in distant Oman and Bahrain, showing the Harappans had diplomatic or cultural ties across oceans. That's not just sophisticated, that's visionary. And yet, without a single palace, monument, or boastful inscription, the civilization remains humble in its ruins. Unlike Egyptian pharaohs or Babylonian kings who immortalized themselves in stone, the Harappans left behind no named rulers, no divine kings, no massive statues of power. Perhaps this was their silent philosophy, that civilization is built not on domination, but on harmony, craft, and balance. They poured more energy into infrastructure than into iconography. They prioritized sanitation over self-glorification. Their greatness wasn't shouted, it was lived. And perhaps that's the most important message they left us. In a world obsessed with legacy and fame, the Harappans built a civilization that lasted 700 years, not through empire, but through equity, through systemic thinking, respect for nature, and a deep-rooted sense of order. In many ways, they were ahead of us, designing cities that could breathe, that could endure floods, that could sustain massive populations without ever collapsing into chaos. And what caused their decline? That remains debated. Some point to climate change, a weakening monsoon and the drying up of the mighty Saraswati River. Others cite tectonic shifts that altered river courses, leaving cities stranded without water. There's even evidence of gradual urban decline, a slow shift from cities to villages, not an abrupt collapse. But what stands out is that there's little evidence of violence. No mass graves, no burnt cities, just a gentle fading, a civilization that may have bowed to nature rather than fought it. And that alone sets it apart in the annals of history. In the final analysis, the Indus Valley Civilization was not just the world's first urban empire. It was a blueprint for sustainable, decentralized, and harmonious living. In a time when we face climate crises, urban overpopulation, and water scarcity, the Harappans speak to us, even through silence. They ask us to rethink power, to design for resilience, to seek balance with the earth rather than dominion over it. And maybe, just maybe, if we listen carefully, their buried cities will whisper back answers we've been chasing for centuries. Their story may be ancient, but its wisdom is more urgent than ever. If this journey through the lost cities of the Indus stirred your curiosity, there's more waiting,
more untold civilizations, more hidden legacies, more wisdom buried in time, just like this. So whoever you are, historian, dreamer, explorer, stick around, share your thoughts, explore our other stories, because the past is never really gone. It's just waiting for someone to listen.